Let's break down the responses here, starting with the United States. White House National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby called the collision unsafe and unprofessional. Was that an appropriate response? What do you make of that?
Yes, well, it's the official spokesman has to some extent, use boilerplate language and make obvious sorts of criticisms. They have to be careful about what sort of line they take that may be interpreted as a threat or a promise. So it's an easy thing to say that it was unprofessional. For the pilot to hit the propeller of the plane is not obviously a way that a well-planned military operation would go. So that's a way of registering the American indignation, while at the same time not actually saying anything that boxes us in about how we would respond in a future case. Now, what's important now is the question of whether this happens again. And or whether the United States adjusts its intelligence collection operations to reduce this sort of risk. In other words, things could go in either direction. If the Americans become more cautious about how we send our aircraft to collect this sort of intelligence, then the Russians can think they've won something. And if the United States says we've got to show the Russians that nobody can push us around, as it were, then the Russians have an incentive to push back too, and this raises the risks of another possible incident.
Do you think that measured response was a little too cautious? Do you think there should have been more done on the US's end to respond tougher to this, or do you think that measured response was appropriate?
I think it was appropriate because there's no reason to make firm statements in public about exactly what the United States will or will not do. That would reduce our flexibility. It would increase our vulnerability to the other side exploiting whatever sort of wiggle room our statement seemed to leave. So some ambiguity is reasonable, and it also doesn't preclude other channels of communication. What's more important is what we tell the Russians secretly, not in a press conference, or what we ask allies to communicate to them. That where it's not complicated by the possible impact on public opinion or domestic politics or relations with allies is really the more important sort of communication. And we don't know exactly what sorts of points may be made in those channels.
Sure. And what does this type of incident do to those sorts of channels? Is there still that secret communication going on?
Well, we don't know. If it's secret by definition, we don't know. I'm sure that there are all sorts of initiatives through various channels, diplomatic, informal, and communications that journalists may make when they're traveling. There are all sorts of ways to get in touch. So I assume that a lot of that is going on, and we won't know about all of it until probably well after the main events have passed.